We have a new AEW Women's World Champion, Bret Hart, possibly being teased coming into AEW, plus Chris Jericho debuts his new gimmick on Dynamite last night. The Hardys make their AEW in-ring debut, plus a new addition to Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley and William Regal's faction. All this and more in today's AEW news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into today. As is always the case after an episode of AEW Dynamite, it's always a big episode. So we've got plenty of news stories to get into. So let's get straight into the first one, and that is that we have a new AEW Women's World Champion being Thunder Rosa. Last night's AEW Dynamite saw Thunder Rosa finally pull out the victory and become the new AEW Women's Champion for the first time in her career. Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa pushed themselves to the limit during their steel cage main event for the title. The match had just about everything, whether it was thumbtacks, chairs, blood, you name it. It had everything. The finish came when Thunder Rosa hit Baker with the Thunder Driver in the thumbtacks to get the 1, 2, 3. So I think everyone expected this was going to be the case. I think everyone thought that we were going to get a new women's champion last night, and we did. Obviously, several times here on the channel, I've been critical of AEW for their women's division, for their lack of booking, lack of opportunities, lack of presentation when it comes to the women's division since the company started back in 2019. And I do think definitely over the course of the last 18 months or so, we have seen real progression when it comes to the women's division. It's far stronger than it once was. There is much more of an emphasis on presentation there when it comes to having 2 championships, having multiple female matches per show. I think the extra show does make that easier. We've seen a couple of women's main events now, whether it's the first one that was a year ago this week, a year ago to the episode of the St. Patrick's Day Slam, which of course was Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker, lights out main event, one of the best matches of 2021. That was fantastic. Whether it's Britt Baker versus Ruby Soho in the main event of Grand Slam edition of Dynamite, whether it's Britt Baker in the main event of the first episode of Rampage, we are getting there. I think the next step is to have a main event on a pay-per-view, a proper pay-per-view. I know Tony Khan likes to say these specials are like pay-per-views, but pay-per-views are on pay-per-view. That's the difference between a pay-per-view and a show that's on cable television. So that's the next step. But I think AEW deserves a lot of credit for that. I thought the match was fantastic. Was it as good as the match a year ago? I feel like it was pretty close. I mean, I think both competitors have to get a ton of credit here. I mean, they, just like they did a year ago, they absolutely beat the hell out of each other. I mean, at points it was, sometimes whether it's, certain slip-ups, mistakes, or a bit of a zig when they should be zagging, there was a bit of stiffness, but that's what makes a match feel real, and it felt real at points, and it was violent, and it was bloody, and it was fantastic, so I really enjoyed it. I think Thunder Rosa absolutely deserves to be the AEW Women's World Champion. Britt Baker, her title reign's flown by, hasn't it, really? She's been champion for nearly a year. She won it at the end of May, Double or Nothing last year, so I think she deserves a ton of credit for what she's done in the past 12 months, certainly. The match at Revolution, this is why I actually praise the decision not to put the title on Thunder Rosa at Revolution, is because I felt like that moment would have been lost in an event, in a card that was full of big moments and big matches, whether it was the main event, whether it was the dog collar match, whether it was just everything on that show, whether it was the opening match, whether it was the tag team match. I felt like this moment deserved a bigger spot. It deserved a bit of spotlight, and that's what we got here. And I felt that being in Thunder Rosa's hometown of San Antonio, Texas, the atmosphere was electric. The crowd was red hot. It was the main event, and it's what people are talking about today. I think if the title change would have happened at Revolution, people would still be talking about it, but certainly to a lesser extent just because of everything else, that wall of noise that would have been happening coming out of Revolution. So I felt like it was the right call to delay it. It was the right call to give it the main event, and it was the right call to give it its own spotlight. So absolutely tremendous. My only criticism probably would be of the match is that the finish kind of was a bit awkward, because you had the thumbtack spot and then Britt Baker rolls to the outside when it was a powerbomb spot into the thumbtacks. Britt Baker rolls to the outside, kind of hits an awkward chair shot on Thunder Rosa, and then they roll back in and she hits the Thunder Driver for the victory. And I was like, wow, that came out of nowhere. Kind of looked like they maybe had one more spot planned, but they ran out of time. I don't know. or things got a bit misconstrued. Either way, I thought it was tremendous, and if you haven't watched it, it's well worth a watch. So I would recommend going to watch that from St. Patrick's Day Slam's edition of Dynamite last night. Let's continue to talk about Bret Hart. Yes, I've been on a bit of a Bret Hart binge recently, it must be said. So I kind of spoke about this last week when FTR fired Tully Blanchard, that maybe, just maybe, Bret would come in, because we know how big of a fan Dax Howard and Cash Wheeler are of Bret Hart. But I kind of said, I don't know if Bret's willing to do that. Plus, Bret coming in to manage a tag team, I feel like Bret coming in, he should be managing someone like CM Punk. Not that he'd be the mouthpiece, but just to add credibility to that package. But the Young Bucks have teased Bret Hart could be possibly coming into AEW. So, on last night's St. Patrick's Day Slam edition of Dynamite, the Young Bucks seemingly teased that WWE Hall of Famer Bret Hart is joining AEW to manage FTR. As can be seen on Dynamite, FTR justified why they fired Tully Blanchard as their manager last week. Cash Wheeler said, quote, "That wasn't easy to do. It's been obvious that Tully had checked out. When we won the tag titles, he was laser focused, but he lost his focus later. And when you lose your focus, you lose your job." This led to the Bucks confronting FTR, who said, quote, "No matter what you do, even if you hire the best there is, the best manager in the world, it's not going to matter, because deep down inside, you're always going to remain the second best tag team in AEW. It was clearly a reference at Bret Hart. I mean, of course, after Dynamite last week, it was Dax Howard actually put out a tease that possibly, maybe, Bret could be coming in to be their manager. Now, for what it's worth, of course, Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley actually did execute the heart attack in their match against Chuck Taylor and Wheeler Yuta. We'll speak about that match in a second. Of course, that move was the finishing move of the Hart Foundation in the 1980s. Now, it wouldn't be Bret Hart's first appearance in AEW, of course. In May of 2019, AEW's first ever show, Double or Nothing, Bret Hart appeared to unveil the AEW World Championship title. Later that year, he did welcome the idea of making future appearances in AEW, so look, he would have seen, I'm sure, how AEW utilizes managers and legends, and he wouldn't necessarily, even the travel, Sting pretty much appears every week on Dynamite because it's once a week, it's much easier travel than in WWE, and frankly, he wouldn't have to appear at every Dynamite if he didn't want to. FTR aren't wrestling every single week, so there's lots of different options there. Again, would he come in to manage FTR, a tag team? Or, I suppose, I know FTR meant to be part of the Pinnacle, but what's that? Is that faction? What even is that faction? Because Tully's meant to be part of that, and Wardlow's meant to be part of that as well, but MJF's feuding with Wardlow now as well, so I don't really know what that's really going on with that faction. Who's to say that Bret Hart doesn't come in and make his own faction? I said that he should be the manager of CM Punk. Why can't he be the manager of Punk, but also have FTR in there? Why can't we have a new version, a 2022 version of Bret Hart's Hart Foundation? They can't use that name, I think, but who knows what they could do? So maybe it's planting the seeds. Maybe it's just a red flag, a red, what's the phrase? Let me know what the phrase is. Can't think what the phrase is. Either way, I don't know if he would be coming in, but I'm on a big Bret Hart binge, like I said, at the moment. I've been watching a lot of his interviews and a lot of his stuff, so I'd certainly welcome it a lot. Chris Jericho debuted his new gimmick last night on Dynamite as well. Now, a few weeks after filing to trademark monikers such as Sports Entertainer and The Influencer, Chris Jericho debuted a new gimmick on this week's St. Patrick's Day Slam edition of Dynamite. Accompanied to the ring by Jake Hager, Daniel Garcia, and 2.0 of the Jericho Appreciation Society Stable, Jericho explained why he's always been a sports entertainer, not merely a pro wrestler. He said, if there's no Chris Jericho, there'd be no AEW. But instead of praising me, you undermine me. You take me for granted. You insult me on social media. I read what you write. It's very hurtful. He starts talking about how these people that he's surrounded with appreciate him, so they're part of the Jericho Appreciation Society. He said, quote, "We appreciate each other. We realize we don't relate to the rest of the AEW roster. We aren't like them because they're nothing more than pro wrestlers. A pro wrestler has never been legendary. A pro wrestler has never been a millionaire. And as a legendary millionaire many times over, the only reason I was able to do it is because I'm not a pro wrestler. I am a sports entertainer." Now, this then led to Daniel Garcia going, whoa. I'm not sure if you can say that. And he said, you know what? I am a sports entertainer, which got a big reaction from the crowd as well. Big boos, because that's a WWE term, isn't it? That's what he's doing there. He's being clever. He's flipping it around. WWE calls themselves sports entertainers, not pro wrestlers. It's a dirty word. And Jericho's kind of doing the Mick Foley in ECW in the 90s, right? Where he'd come out with the WWFing F and F at the time, saying that, he's a sports entertainer, because there's nothing more insulting to a pro wrestling crowd than calling yourself a sports entertainer. So I enjoyed that part of it. The Daniel Garcia inclusion in the group I always felt a bit odd, because considering there's a group of wrestlers and Daniel Garcia is a wrestler, when the group being Jon Moxley, Bryan Danielson and William Regal, logic would say that Daniel Garcia would fit perfectly into that. And if anything, Bryan Danielson referenced him in a promo a few weeks ago when sort of putting together this faction. So it always felt odd, but I guess that's kind of the point, isn't it? Is that Daniel Garcia is so out of place, and it is so, how does he get more over as a heel? It's by saying, you guys think I'm a great pro wrestler. I'm not a pro wrestler, I'm a sports entertainer. That's even more insulting. This guy that's clearly a pro wrestler calling himself a sports entertainer. That works. I felt like that was a good point in there. 2.0 also got new names. Jericho said, and by the way, that's a stupid name from Bad Creative and you'll never hear it again. We don't use made-up names in the Jericho Appreciation Society. We use our real names. From now on, Matt Lee is Daddy Magic Matt Menard and Jeff Parker is Cool Hand Edge Angelo Parker. And he referenced Kevin Owens, saying that when they got released, his former best friend Kevin asked him to help his friends and brought him into AEW and all that kind of stuff. So that's the new gimmick from Jericho. I do think this will evolve somewhat more. I'm still waiting to see really where it goes. The reason I say that is because it still is very Inner Circle 2.0. They're trying to differentiate, but it's tough to differentiate going from a faction to another faction and saying, this is a different faction, look, different people, when it's still kind of the same. I think Jericho will evolve his look. I think Jericho will evolve his in-ring attire. I think that he should ditch the Judas theme song because that still gets a big pop. This was kind of the problem, actually, when he came out. When he started his promo, he was still very, very over with the San Antonio audience. Like, they were cheering him. Even when he was starting to insult them and all that kind of stuff, they were still cheering him. It's only really when he started the whole sports entertainer stuff that he started to get the boos. So I feel like there's more he'll probably need to do. I feel like there's more they need to evolve and change in this. I don't think it's a terrible idea. I don't like the name. I don't think Jericho Appreciation Society is all that great. I don't think the catchphrase and that's entertainment is that great. But I think the way to go with it is go as WWE as you can, because that's really what he's trying to do. He's trying to say, look, I'm a WWE guy in front of an AEW audience. I'm a sports entertainer. All of those quirks that WWE has, do that. Like, do that kind of stuff. And I think that might be the way to go. Refer to them as the AEW universe. And all of those little quirks, maybe that's the direction that they'll go in. We'll wait and see. Like I said, I still think there's evolution to go in this new Jericho character. And he kind of said at the end of this promo, this is the new evolved Jericho. This is the next step. This is the new thing. Whether or not he can pull it off, we'll wait and see. But I appreciated Edge evolving his character on Raw. New entrance music, new look, new vibe, all that kind of stuff. I appreciate these guys trying to reinvent themselves, and I appreciate them taking big swings to try it, taking risks. That's what Jericho's doing here. That's what Edge is doing on Raw. So we'll see. We'll see how that one goes. Now, the Hardys made their in-ring debut last night on AEW Dynamite. They defeated Private Party. One thing I will say, by the way, is Matt Hardy, you sort of forget, he looks great. They both look great. They're both in their 40s now. Matt's, of course, older than Jeff. And Matt Hardy's in way better shape than he was in his 30s, frankly. But he's obviously dyed his hair. And Matt Hardy's got the whole, the bald spot going on back there. Just a little reminder of how old they are. But I thought they looked great. They were super, super over the pop. And it was such a good idea. It really was such a good idea that AEW got the rights to Loaded, the theme for the Hardy Boys in WWE, because there is so much conditioning involved in that, right? Every single person, as soon as that first beat of the song goes, every single person knows who's coming out. It's the Hardy Boys, right? They're coming out. So the pop they got when they came out was massive. The match was the match. I think it was a standard Hardy match. I wouldn't say it was particularly special or amazing, but it was great. They're over. I don't think they should go straight into the tag team title picture yet. Afterwards, they were somewhat confronted by, of course, the AFO now, the Andrade Family Office, whatever it's called. They came out and attacked, which is Andrade, Blade, and Butcher. Out came Sting and Darby Allin to sort of even the playing field there. So I think we're going to eventually get to a point where we're going to get some kind of 8-man tag team match, which is going to be the Hardys, Sting, and Darby versus Andrade, Blade and Butcher, maybe Jose or one of either Private Party in there. I don't know. That looks like the direction that it's going to be going in. And again, I don't think the Hardys should be going straight into title contention. They won't anyway because there's a ranking system, but they should be having these sort of dream matches before they get anywhere near the titles. The titles should come really towards the end. I would expect it to be even a year, to be honest, until they get anywhere near the tag titles, because there's plenty of matches, there's plenty of tag teams, so they don't need to be rushing into anything, and they need to be picking up victories, because that's how you got the rankings as well. So I enjoyed that immensely. Speaking of tag team matches, we had Bryan Danielson and Jon Moxley face off against Chuck Taylor and Wheeler Yuta of the Best Friends, and there was quite an interesting moment after the match. So William Regal was on commentary for the match, and William Regal did a ton of commentary in NXT. He's a good commentator. By the way, if you haven't heard William Regal's interview he did on Talk is Jericho this week, that was the one where all these health reports kind of stem from. He's healthy now, and like he said, he's healthier than he's ever been, but talk about a guy that has been through hell over the course of the last 5 years or so when it comes to medical stuff and health stuff. Oh my goodness. And the fact that nobody really knew, because he was working this whole time when he's talent scouting and setting up these events like the UK tournament for WWE or the Cruiserweight Classic or the Mae Young Classic and all that kind of stuff, or training at the Performance Center. He's going through life battling stuff. Whether it's like 2 neck surgeries, open heart surgery, getting septicemia in his leg, being told he's going to have his leg cut off, or he's got 24 hours to live because he's going septic, and all this kind of stuff. It was unbelievable. So if you haven't listened to it, go listen to the Talk is Jericho episode. It's absolutely brilliant. It's a 2-parter as well. They're going to revisit, kind of the AEW-centric stuff, not William Regal's sort of history over the course of the last 5 years. It's just a great listen. So he was on commentary last night, and he was great. Now, the match had Danielson and Moxley defeating Wheeler Yuta and Chuck Taylor. He actually, it was a very impressive performance by Wheeler Yuta in it. They had spots where Bryan Danielson's kicking Yuta in the chest several times, and Wheeler's, firing up and all that kind of stuff. Danielson, of course, is previously referenced Yuta as one of the talents he could improve under he and Moxley's tutorage, and Yuta seems to have given the same thought as everyone else. Instead of walking away with the Best Friends after the match, he walked back into the ring and walked up to William Regal. He offered out his hand for Regal to shake, and Regal, like, he's not wrestling anymore, but he's still got that slap. Oh my goodness, he slapped him. And it's kind of that old, if you're going to do it, lay it in. He absolutely did that. He slapped him in the face, but when Yuta didn't back down, Regal turned to Danielson and Moxley. The segment ended with the 3 men discussing things in the ring, so it looks like Wheeler Yuta is probably going to be going into this faction, whatever it is, of sort of wrestlers and different kinds of wrestlers, technical wrestlers. It's sort of every sort of facet, I guess, of William Regal, whether it's, technical wrestling in Bryan Danielson, psychotic sort of madman stuff in Jon Moxley, sort of maybe sort of more of a Japanese style in Wheeler Yuta, all of that kind of stuff. So I think Wheeler Yuta's a good fit in there. Like I said, Daniel Garcia would have been perfect for it, but he's doing stuff with the Jericho Appreciation Society, and this group could be a lot of fun. I think there should be a female aspect in there. I think Serena Deeb's perfect for it. Perfect. Whether or not they will get a female person in there, I hope we do, because it should be about wrestling, and I think that will be a lot of fun. So we'll see where that one goes, but I really did enjoy that segment, and I'm just enjoying William Regal in general. And I, of course, as I mentioned, always I'm biased when it comes to that. Joey Janela is leaving AEW. It was one of these stories where I'm going to be honest, like, I don't really care that much about it. He recently did an interview with Denise Salcedo and was spoken to about his contract situation. Of course, we know his contract's coming up. He said, quote, "My contract's up on May 1st, and I've got to say no now. I'm not interested in signing with AEW, re-signing with them." He said he's not going to re-sign with the company. Now, he's largely been doing stuff for GCW anyway, but reportedly there's actually quite a lot of heat on Joey Janela anyway, which is why he's not actually going to be offered a new contract. So there's 2 different points of contention here. He's going, I'm not going to re-sign if I'm offered a new contract, and AEW kind of like, actually, we're not going to offer you a new contract. PW Insider is reporting that they reached out to AEW sources and confirmed that there was indeed heat on Joey Janela for causing the injury to Eddie Kingston a few weeks ago. Of course, he had a broken orbital bone because of Joey Janela in a match, as it prevented Kingston from traveling to TV, and plans for the Jericho feud had to be altered. Janela was also correct in speculating that there was a belief internally that several talents were hurt while working with him in the ring, which obviously worked against him. Janela has not been brought back in by AEW since the Charlotte taping, which of course is where the injury to Eddie Kingston occurred. PW Insider were told that he is not expected to be utilized again before his current deal expires. So essentially, Joey Janela's got heat, and he can say that he's not going to re-sign with the company, but they're not going to offer him a new contract because he's got heat after injuring Eddie Kingston, and that looks to be the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to Joey Janela, because reportedly he's either hurt or injured other people in the ring, which that's the bread and butter of pro wrestling. If you've got that reputation, you're kind of over at that point, and not in the good way. We saw last night as well a possible gimmick change for Chris Statlander. Of course, we saw Wheeler Yuta trying to align himself possibly with the new faction of Moxley, Danielson, and Regal, but we also saw a possible gimmick change for the Galaxy's greatest alien, Chris Statlander. Crowd voices could be heard chanting Statlander, Statlander, after she removed her coloured contact from her eye and started cleaning off her makeup. Now, this is an interesting one because she's been involved in this sort of feud with Layla Hirsch. Of course, she was defeated by Layla Hirsch, and she's also kind of been involved in Red Velvets as well. That's been a bit of a triangle kind of feud with that one. And I said several times that during it, I really did feel like Chris Statlander is, even though Layla Hirsch is meant to be the heel in this storyline, she felt very heelish in some of the things she was saying. Now, I didn't hate the gimmick of the Galaxy's greatest alien. I think there's a ceiling to it, obviously, and I think she's got a great look. And I think Statlander's a good worker. I did feel like the match she had with Layla Hirsch was riddled by botches, it must be said, in the match at Revolution in the buy-in. But what this new gimmick will be, I don't know. And that's the point, is to build intrigue, I guess. We'll keep an eye out for that one. Finally, we have matches announced for Rampage on Friday. The cards for Friday's Rampage was announced during Dynamite this week. It will be a different time of Rampage this week. The episode of Rampage will be airing at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time instead of the normal time of 10 p.m. due to the NCAA basketball tournament. The card that's been announced so far is Keith Lee facing off against Max Caster. There was a backstage segment that happened this week about that. Keith Lee's involved in a feud with Team Taz, Powerhouse Hobbs, Ricky Starks, etc. We've got Darby Allin versus The Butcher, which of course comes out of that Hardy Boys segment this week too. We've got Layla Hirsch versus Red Velvet. There was an interview with Red Velvet during Dynamite 2, which set up that one. And we've also got the House of Black, which of course is Malachi Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews facing Bear Country and Fuego del Sol in what promises to be pretty much a squash match. So we'll talk about that once that happens on Friday. Anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe to Wrestle News 365, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.